So we're going to start with our highest part in our design. So if I look at the picture, the highest part of my bumblebee is going to be this area in the center here. So this is where we will start, and then we will work our way down and out as we go. So if I look at this, I would like to have these figures here right at the top, and then one layer down we'll have this pattern, and then another layer down, and then we'll have these little dots, and then the same way towards the front. I would again like to have these ones, the eyes, a little bit higher than this area. So once we're done here, we'll move on to the eyes. So we'll do this in steps or in layers, and we need to keep in mind that we need to add all our details to our layers before we can start lifting them up. So if I look at this first piece here, I've got no detail on these ones, so I can immediately start with them. But once I move on to the next layer, I have these 4 little dots in between, and I need to remember that I need to add them first before I can move on to the next layer. So what I like to do before I start doing my embossing projects is I like to look at the design and try and imagine how I would do it on Pewter step by step. So I can immediately prepare myself before I start. So I would have to think about when would be the correct time to add these little dots, which I would do using one of the ball and cup tools. I can't do them right at the end before I lift up the full neck design. I need to do them before I start lifting up these 2 layers. Otherwise it starts getting too high to do them with a ball and cup tool. I can also do them freehand, but for this exercise I would like to have nice and smooth rounded little dots there, so I would prefer to use my ball and cup tool. Also, I need to look at my wings here. I've got the same little round circles that I would like to bring up first before I can start working on the other layers or the other design. The same with these ones. So the whole training exercise of the bumblebee is to learn when to do what detail and when to do which layer. So for this one, we're going to start now with our highest part, which is going to be these 5 designs here. So using the technique of working from the front, I have now already traced my design. My pewter is nice and smooth, and before I get started I need to add some lubricant. So this is just a little bit of baby oil that I spray on, and then just cover the whole area that I'm going to work around. So working on the front of my design, and I'm working on my lino sheet. I'm not on my felt and I'm not on my tile. I'm on my semi-soft surface, which is my lino sheet, and I'm going to work now with my 0.5mm ball tool. I'm going to start with the central design, and with a medium to a hard pressure I'm going to draw from the front the outline of my first design. Remember that it is easier to control your line and your pressure if you draw the line towards you rather than away from you. Once I've done that outline, I can remove my lino sheet from below my pewter, and then I'm going to use a paper stump that has got a nice flat edge, and I would like to have this a long flat edge, which would make it easier to flatten around my design. So we flatten now on our hard surface, and I'm going to flatten with the paper stump at a very flat angle. I want the paper stump to lie on my pewter on this edge fully. I don't want to use a high angle, which means I'm using the point of the paper stump, which will make lines on my pewter. So I want to use all of this surface flat on the pewter. I also want to flatten towards my design that I'm trying to raise up. So I'm going to start a little bit away so that I push all of this space, empty space here, into that central design. And it's just smooth motions, flattening towards my design. And remember that your pewter is not fixed to the table. So you turn your pewter as you go and keep the point towards your design area. And you can immediately see how that central design is picking up. So once you're done flattening with the paper stump, you will see a little ridge that forms on the side of your design. And to get away or to remove that ridge, we're now going to use the skew flat tip Teflon tool. You can also use a straight tip, but I find the skew one works better because I can control where I point the sharp part. So again, I'm going to use it with the flat edge, totally flat with my pewter, and I'm working towards my design, and I'm using that point to flatten that little ridge around my pewter design that is now lifted up. So flattening all around, and remember that your pewter is not fixed to the table, so turn your pewter as you need to. And you want to do this straight up against the raised area. Once I've done that, I need to define my line around. This just gets rid of any extra bubble that there might have been. Okay, so now I'm ready to move on to the next two. So since there are a bit of a space in between them, I can do both of them at the same time. Again, I'm drawing towards me. And I'm using a medium to a hard pressure. You want this to really pop up. So you will have to practice the amount of pressure that you need to apply. Then I need to flatten on my hard surface. So I'm using my paper stump and I'm flattening towards my design. I'm not going to go in between these two at the moment. I'm first going to go around both of them. And then once I'm done, I'm going to now use a little bit more of the point because I can't flatten at a flat angle in between. Just draw a line and then flatten towards the one side and then flatten towards the other side. Again, I'm just making sure I've got a nice flat area, and then I need to tidy up with the Teflon tip. I'm working again towards my designs, and I'm using the flat tip at a flat angle on the pewter, and I'm using the sharp point straight up against the raised area. Turning my pewter as needed. And then I need to define my shape, because once I've lifted up the second layer, I can't come back to tidy up these edges. So I need to make 100% sure that they are perfect before I move on. So still working on the front, I'm now going to put back my liner sheet, and then we can do the last two shapes, teardrops, working on the front of my pewter with my metal ball tool, and I try to do the lines drawing towards me. I then remove the liner sheet, and now I'm going to flatten again with my paper stamp on my hard surface, working towards my design. And you can see I always take it a little bit away from the design. I don't start flattening right against it, because then I'm going to lose all of that space, and I want to push all of this space into that design to lift it up. And then I need to go in between, and for that you need to lift up the angle of your paper stump a bit. Once done with the paper stump, I need to tidy up with my Teflon tool. And I work again at a flat angle and with the sharp point of the Teflon tool straight up against the raised area. And then I know to define the outline, so make sure everything is nice and smooth. And that's it for our first layer. So this will lift up as we go along. So for the second layer, it would be this outline here on both sides. Now I have to remember that I've got these 4 little dots in between, and I first would like to add them before we lift up that layer. So I'm going to place my pewter back on the lino, and we're still going to work from the front, and I'm going to use my 5mm metal ball tool, which is the one that I've been working with the whole time, and I'm just going to press in those little dots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is a medium to a soft pressure. You need to be careful that you don't press straight through your pewter. Okay, so now I'm ready to lift up that second layer. I'm going to turn my pewter so that I can draw these lines towards me, so that I can have more control, working on the front of my pewter on my lino sheet using my metal ball tool. I'm going to draw with a medium to a hard pressure. The outline, I'm going to try and do this in one line, but if you cannot do it in one line, if you have stopped there, then always start where you have stopped. Put your metal ball tool in that same curve or that same indent, and then start drawing from there again. So if I stop there, I would start from that corner again and draw the next part. And then I'm going to turn my pewter again so that I can work towards me. So I'm not going to do this line at the moment, because I want to do that line when I do the overall design. I can repeat this one more time just to make sure I've got enough pressure in there. And then we need to remove our liner sheet, and we need to flatten on our hard surface. I'm flattening with my paper stump towards my design and try to get right into that little corners there, and I'm going to flatten just slightly here, and then flatten around the back. I'm going to flatten just a little bit. And then I need to take my Teflon tool, and then I need to tidy up the edges. Now that's the nice thing about this Teflon tool with this sharp point. You really can get into all of these tiny little corners. I'm not going to flatten on the sides. We'll do that once we've got the rest of the outline. And then we need to define. Not defining the edges on the outside, just the curvy one. There we go. So I've got more than enough height in there. There's no need to add extra height from the back, so we can continue with our next layer. So before I can do the next layer, I need to remember these little dots. So I want to do them now, because if I do the next one, my central part is going to be too high, and it's going to be difficult to do these dots with my ball and cup tool. So let me just find the correct size. So I think this one should be fine. So for the ball and cup tool, we work on our pewter from the back, and I'm going to do this on my felt material, and I'm using 2 layers of felt. So we're going to take our pewter, we're going to turn it upside down, and then using the ball and cup tool, it's a matter of pressing down and then moving in a circular motion. So down and then moving in a circular motion. Do the second one, and then this one. And I'm not using a lot of pressure, it's like a medium pressure. Don't want to press straight through. Then we need to turn our pewter face up again and put it on our hard surface so that we can do the cup around each of these little dots. So now I take the cup, simply hold it over, make sure that it's nice and centered, and then press down, and you should get a nice smooth edges around your circle. Press down over the center and press down. The center and press down. Again over the center of my raised dot and press down. So you will see that I've got a little bit of a bumpy surface here, so we need to flatten that. And again, I want to flatten so that I can push all of that height into the central part. So using my paper stump, and I'm still on my hard surface, working on the front of my pewter, I'm going to flatten all of that, and I'm going to push all of that height into the central design, raising that part up even more. And then I need to define again. You always need to define once you've worked from the back and you flattened from the front. Okay, so now we can move on to raising the next layer. So back onto my lino. I'm going to use my 0.5mm metal ball tool, and we're going to draw the next outline. Again, I've got my pewter in a direction that I can draw towards me. And then we need to do this line as well. Still working on the front and on my liner sheet. And then I need to flatten. So I remove my liner sheet on my hard surface and I use the paper stump to flatten again. So I always have one side of the paper stump I keep nice and sharp. The other side I can round up a bit that I can use from the back. So now you just need to be careful because we're going to work around these little circles, so you don't want to flatten them. So you need to use a little bit of a steady hand working around them. And then we need to take our Teflon tool and tidy up the edges. Again, I'm not working on these sides, I'm just working on the top and the bottom one. Okay, so I've got quite an amount of height in there already. Okay, so the next part is then the overall outline. So I need to do this one and then the outline surrounding the design. On my front of my pewter, on my liner sheet, I try to draw towards me. Now you need to be very careful because there's a little bump here, so I need to use a steady hand to go over that bump. And then we need to flatten. So I remove the liner sheet and I'm now working on the hard surface on the front of my design, and I'm going to flatten towards it. And then I need to take the Teflon tool and then I need to define. So the defining that I do is in a very soft line. It is not a hard pressure. I don't want to thin these edges out too much because I still have to work constantly around them. So now I need to lift this up a little bit from the back. I need this to be higher than the edges. So I'm going to work on my felt material now, and I'm going to work on a full 4 layers of felt. So I've got a nice thick cushion. I'm going to turn my pewter upside down so we're now working from the back. And I'm not going to use a paper stump for this. I'm going to use my hands because it's nice and soft. You can use your thumb, and you just want to softly lift out the back a little bit. You don't want to press too hard that you lose your shape. So just softly mold out the pewter to the front. And I'm going to concentrate in the center because I want like a half domed shape in the front. So my pressure is slightly more in the center than on the edges. Then I'm going to use my soft tip paper stamp, and I'm just going to add a little bit of a height to the detail lines here, because when I raised it now or smoothed it out with my thumb, you might have lost a little bit of height in your detailed areas. So I just want to add them back in a little bit. Okay, so before we go back, I want to add some detail lines in the center here. So it's going to create a little ridge from the front. So I'm using my 0.5mm metal ball tool. I'm working on the back of my pewter, and I'm working on 4 layers of felt material. So with a medium pressure, I'm just going to draw in a line right in the center of that teardrop. I'm going to do it on all 5 of them. By doing this, I'm also adding more depth into this piece. So this is a medium pressure. You want to do this as smooth as possible so that you don't have any bumps from the front. Here we go. So now I can turn this over and see if I'm happy with the height that I've got. So that's quite nice. I've got a nice dome here. So this is much higher than the edges. And now, because I worked from the back, we need to flatten again. So using my paper stump on my hard surface, I'm going to flatten, and I'm going to push all of that extra height into that design. And then I need to tidy up using the Teflon tip. So once we fold this with beeswax, we'll come back and then define some of these lines again. But we cannot do it now because then I'll flatten this whole raised area. And then I need to define. And this is, again, it's a soft pressure. I'm not pressing very hard. There we go. Okay, so if I can try and slightly tilt this for you, so you can see I've got a little bit of a dome shape going. It is higher in the central area than it is on the edges. So now I can move on to my next design part.